here when I was in the depth program, and have encouraged me to go down this route and examine the idea behind my paper back when I was in their classes. My paper is called "The Practice of Myth in the Trenches of Life." Recently, I watched the History Channel's Hatfields and McCoys. Among the various reasons for the long, bloody feud between the two families, apparent was a stark contrast of how each of the families understood their personal responsibility to God. Needless to say, this contrast served as a volatile fuel for the fires of profound religious and psychological differences. Families and their preferred myths, among other passions, were in dire opposition. This simple story of the clash of moral and religious passions and perspectives is nothing new. In fact, it's very ancient. It is, in my opinion, the repetition of an ancient human theme, competing mythologies, struggling for place and power, wrought from the depths of human experience, thought to have exclusive rights to perceived truth. And therein, in my opinion, lies a major problem in the postmodern culture. This seems to be especially evident from the past record, but also in our present day. Sadly, and ironically, religion seems to be a routine key player in culture wars. This is an extremely important point, at least for what I would like to try to say this morning. As a student of mythological studies, I have learned that myth and religion are twin sisters, two sides of the same coin, sharing rituals as common expressions. The religious culture wars we are witnessing in our present era can easily be traced back to religious ideologies based in powerful, persuasive, mythological themes and psychological constructs. We wonder where this clash is taking us. Jonathan Sacks, in his book, The Dignity of Difference, aptly reminds us, if religion is not a part of the solution, it will certainly be a part of the problem. As a theologian, ordained minister, and former vocational career pastor, all of this deeply troubles me. Indeed, it is one of the reasons I left the church. While religion, based in the riches of mythopoeic language, thought, ritual, and symbol, and by its own internal confessions, should be exemplifying the highest ideals of love, compassion, and unity, often it seems to be a plethora of hate, confusion, bigotry, competition for converts. It is this dissonance that has inspired me to present some thoughts this morning. And in my life, personally, to try to develop an approach, a way to get inside these inherently cultural, religious myths and embody. Now, we want to point to our t-shirt here. We're working with this morning, Anima Mundi Colende Gratia, to tend the soul of the world. What does that mean? What does that look like? Anthropologist Marshall David Solins offers a helpful approach with his idea of what he terms mythopraxis. I quote, "When two distinct cultures interpret and act in a common situation, if they ascribe different meanings to the same events, and if these events are important for both cultures, a working misunderstanding may result. If the misunderstanding is sufficiently important for both parties, it can determine the course of history. Clearly, it seems, then, that whoever, in this case the modern mythologist, attempts to understand and work in the crucible of the clash of cultural and religious phenomena, that mythologist must obviously be balanced, discerning, and really damn careful. Always with an eye to the potential to get lost in the fray and cause more harm than good. I feel the mythologist must work diligently to find a portal of entry, a point of dialogue, become available, even vulnerable, understanding his or her own myths and propensities to declare them as a sort of monotruth. So I am suggesting a more vulnerable, embodied, incarnational approach to the problem with the hermeneutical tools of depth psychology as a possible point of entry. In my estimation, the role of the mythologist can be a relevant and crucial role in the potential healing of deep rifts and wounds for our present era. Maybe in the government we should have the Department of Mythology or something. It's just an idea, you never know.
I think they already have one.
Okay. Very good. In any sort of dogma, be it theological, political, or cultural, what gets hit the hardest, and this is coming from my pastoral care experience, is the people. It's the people who get hit the hardest. When I was a new young pastor serving a congregation in the wheat fields of rural Minnesota, after 3 mere years, I was becoming very depressed. I was appalled by the quarreling in the parish, the pettiness, the marshaling of theological forces on the left and the right. I was drained of energy. I went to our family doctor, a general practitioner, poured out my heart. He listened patiently. He gently took me by the hand and quietly told me that earlier in his career he had an opportunity to continue on as a cardiac specialist. But he felt deeply compelled to stay, he said, and this became my pastoral theology mantra: in the trenches of life, where the people are. Where the masses live and experience the rich and varied cycle of life. So perhaps, I thought, my focus should change. From attempting to triumph over the dizzying culture wars in the church to focusing on the systematic roots and symptoms of the deeper angst displayed in religious arguments. I know now that people were just doing what is usual, what goes on every day in the trenches, picking and tearing at each other's perceived mythological constructs, defending our preferred paradigms of God, fearful that all we know and believe and defines our lives will be under threat. The theologian Paul Tillich refers to this phenomena as the shaking of the foundations. Hillman calls it the discomfort of psychic reality. Love that. Jewish theologian Lawrence Holst tells us, when we are invited onto the ground of another person's suffering, we are indeed on holy ground. As a minister, along with my physician's wise counsel, when I was younger, this helped me develop my approach to human need, what I called trench theology. That is, knowing that most of us live daily on the front lines of life, vulnerable to the threat and the shell shock, the possibility every day of life coming apart at the seams. The mythologist, in my way of understanding, should be there to understand that. It also seems, this is very terrifying stuff, it also seems that for some this involves a disintegration of personal myth. Along with Jung daily, even if couched in different language, in my experience, people ask themselves in those secret places, what is the myth you are living? Maybe there is a place for trench mythology. This is to say, somehow in deep humility and in the biblical term of grace, to attempt to come alongside of those whose lives are shaken because ours has been shaken. That's the key. We're not pontificating, we're blowing smoke. It is because we have had similar problems that somehow we can offer hope. Listening to someone's myth falling apart, and the shaking of the foundations, and the psychic dissonance, perhaps is one of the most holy things we can do. able to comprehend messages. Just perhaps, the postmodern mythologist can occupy an important gap in culture wars.